So when Jeremy first reached out to me to speak, I wanted to know, okay, what's the conference theme? And I found out it was power and bold decisions. And I thought, how fitting. See, I grew up constantly hearing my mother say to me, never judge anyone because everyone has a story, and only you have the power to decide how your story defines you. The challenge I had as a child was my power and bold decisions were coming from some very unexpected places. Now, I'm going to forewarn you when I share this with you, you're going to hear some things that are disturbing and very graphic. I want you to know that going into this. See, my father was a black pimp, a 1970s pimp and drug dealer. Now, when I say pimp, I don't mean the positive our society somehow turned the word into. Pimp my ride, pimp my apartment. My father was a real pimp. He put women on the street corner, they sold their bodies, and he took every dollar. Now, along the way, he also managed to father 23 children. I'm one of 23. The most he had by one woman, 3. So that lets you know how much he got around. Now, as a child, I rarely saw my father. I used to refer to him as a solar eclipse, meaning you rarely saw him, but when you did, for a little boy, it was magical. On those rare occasions I would see my father, I knew I was guaranteed 3 things. 1, I knew I was going to hear this ridiculous story about how he justified what he did for a living. He would always say the only difference between him and the CEO of Budweiser was our government chose to make his drug legal. And I would hear this story all the time. He would tell it to his friends. He would tell it to us as children. And I'd always hear this story, and I thought it was ridiculous. Okay, CEO of Budweiser, I get it. That was 1. 2, I knew I'd watch my father beat women, and I knew we'd go around and collect money from prostitutes. And then 3, I knew there was a high probability that I was going to be sexually molested by one of my father's prostitutes. I knew she was going to make me go down on her at the age of 6, 7, 8 years old. And when I didn't do it right, she was going to slap me in the head and tell me to do it right. I was 6, 7, and 8 years old. What the hell does do it right mean? My mother was an orphan. She was raised in a 1950s institutional orphanage where the kids were routinely neglected, beat, and abused. When she turned 17 years old, they gave her a small suitcase, $20, and they said, good luck to you, there's a world. We know you've never seen the outside of these 4 walls, but there's the world. Make it happen. When I came into the world, it was somewhat by accident. See, my mother before me had a horrific abortion back in 1970, back when it was illegal. My father took her to have an illegal abortion, and it was so bad that the second time she got pregnant, she decided to have me and took her chances in raising a child. Truth be told, she should have never have had me, and I'm okay with that. She was 17 years old. She was a girl. She couldn't raise herself. She had no business trying to raise a child. What's interesting, when I look at this picture, still to this day, when I look at this, I ask myself, what was that scared girl thinking? Was she scared because she had no money? Was she scared because she had no family, no support system? Or was she scared because that's a god-ugly child she was holding? So, here's how I came into the world. We let you know right off the bat, I was a welfare baby. Welfare. They told you. We weren't politically correct back then. Welfare baby. Here's the other thing you'll notice up there. MISS. Single unwed mother who just gave birth to a welfare baby. Last piece you'll see up there, the last name McCormick. That's my last name. See, my father wasn't there when my mom was born. She had to get on a bus and take herself to the hospital to give birth to me. He was nowhere to be found. Given that my mother had grown up in an orphanage, she never had anything to call her own. So now she had this baby. She decided, I'm going to give this child my last name. Here's the problem. I stand here before you today, and I have no clue where this last name comes from. My mother was given that last name in the orphanage. She has no clue where or why. So people will joke with me sometimes, and they'll say, hey, are you part of the McCormick Spice family? Maybe. If I am, can somebody let them know? Last piece on this. If you notice, the balance due was $422.90. I found this bill about 2 years ago in a stack of papers. It was in pristine condition. So I took a chance and I looked up and I found out, wow, Miami Valley Hospital is still there. So I made a copy of the bill. I went and got a cashier's check, and I sent in the cashier's check. Because I figured, you know what? I'm at least going to pay my way into this world. Now, I got to imagine whoever opened this bill had to have said, Mother of God, 1971, you're a little bit late. So I got a little bit better looking over time. But growing up mixed race in Dayton, Ohio in the 70s was brutal. Black people didn't like me because I was half white. White people didn't like me because I was half black. I was constantly referred to as zebra, Oreo cookie, chocolate vanilla swirl, half-breed, and my personal favorite, color confused, as if I had a choice. It didn't help that we were extremely poor. See, when all the other kids went outside after lunch to go to recess, I hung back. I pulled food out of the trash can because I knew there was not going to be anything to eat when I got home. So I got teased for being poor. I got teased for wearing the same clothes every day to school. I got teased because in the winters in Dayton, Ohio, it's cold. We had holes in our shoes, so I wore bread bags on my feet so my feet wouldn't get wet. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it sucked being poor. It sucked being made fun of. But what hurt me the most as a child is what my mother went through. When I would watch my mom endure the things that she had to take in raising a mixed-race child, it cut me to the core. We tried our best to laugh about being poor because we never had these four things at the same time. We never had electricity, water, food, and money all at the same time. We were always missing one, most times two. Did you notice I didn't say phone? Hell, that was a luxury. We never had those four things. My mother and I would joke, because when you're poor, you try to find anything to laugh about. We would always joke to ourselves, and we would say, we were so poor, we couldn't even afford the O and the R. We were just po. So I'm going to share a couple of stories of what my mother had to go through in raising a mixed-race child. My mother never learned how to drive until she was 35 years old. One day we were coming home, and all our belongings were on the curb in front of the projects we lived in. We had no clue why, the few belongings we had. All of a sudden, the manager comes running out of the building, and he gets in my mother's face, and he says, no nigger lovers can live here. Here's the damnedest thing. White people lived in the building. Black people lived in the building. They didn't want mixed race in the building. I remember sitting on the curb with my mother. To this day, I don't know what happened, where we went, what we did, but I remember sitting on that curb, holding my mother's hand, holding a small toy. She's crying, I'm crying, and thinking to myself, as a small child, we have no money, we have no family, we have nowhere to go. What are we going to do? On another occasion, back in the 70s, we had food stamps. See, welfare now, we've made it a little bit too convenient to be on welfare. Now it's on some little debit card looking thing, and you go and no one knows if it's a debit card or a credit card. See, back in the 70s, you had paper food stamps, and it was embarrassing. You were shamed. And I remember making the decision as a child, I said, man, I'm never going to be on food stamps. But I remember on one occasion, we would have to wait in line each month for our allotment of food stamps, for our free food stamps. And that line was 2, 3, 4 hours long. On one occasion, we're standing there, my mother and I, and there's an older white lady in front of us. And she turns around and she looks down at me. She looks up at my mother. She looks at me again. And she calls my mother a nigger lover, and she spits in her face. Now, for me, that was harsh, but what cut me the most is that we couldn't even leave the line. My mother had to stand there, wipe the spit from her face, tears coming down her eyes, humiliated because we had to stand there for our free handout. We could not leave that line because we had to eat. She had to feed this mixed-race child. That really bothered me the most with that. Now, food stamps hold some bad memories for me, because shortly thereafter, my mother ended up facing welfare fraud because she chose to work and take food stamps at the same time. That's a big no-no, I guess. So I ended up being shipped off to Houston, Texas with my father, who had decided to take the pimp game to Houston. When I arrived in Houston, Texas, this is what I arrived to. I arrived to the world-famous Surrey House hourly rate motel. My father was living there with his prostitute and my 6-month-old half-sister. 2 days after I arrived in Houston, my father and the prostitute said, "Hey, we'll be back." I was 9 years old. They left me with a 6-month-old baby. Shortly after they left, my half-sister starts crying. I pick her up. It's okay, it's okay. I'm 9 years old. I don't know how to change a diaper. I don't know how to make a bottle. Hell, this is the first time I've been away from my mother for more than a weekend. 15 minutes later, she's still crying. Now I'm crying. 20 minutes, I'm crying. I become extremely frustrated. I threw my baby sister across the room. The moment she left my hand, I thought to myself, Mother of God, who throws a baby? I immediately ran over, and fortunately, she landed on the couch. I immediately ran over, I picked her up, she's screaming, I'm crying. Oh, but wait, the prostitute shows up, but she's got a man with her. Oh, it's time to do business. She tells me to get out. I walk around this parking lot in Houston, Texas in July, sweltering heat, sweltering humidity, and I have my baby sister with me who has on nothing but a diaper. She's sweating, I'm scared, I'm confused. I just want to go home. To this day, I remember the feeling of, I want to go home. Where's my mom? Fortunately, my mother ended up not going to prison, and she moved to Texas. I continue to live with my father, who now has 3 children with this prostitute. Well, my father decides, you know what? I'm going to take the pimp game back to Dayton, Ohio. So he packs myself, the prostitute, my 3 half-brothers and sisters, packs us all up. We go back to Dayton, Ohio. Here's the problem. No one told my mother. We leave. My mother has no clue where her son is. I'm back in Dayton, Ohio. She's in Texas, and she has no clue where I am. How many of you have seen Forrest Gump? Come on, almost every. Okay, great. Do you remember the scene where Jenny goes back to the house and she has the emotional breakdown? She takes off her shoe, throws at the house. This is my Jenny house. Almost 2 weeks after we get back to Dayton, Ohio, to this house, my father decides, oh, I'm going to England. He just left. He went to England, and he left me with the prostitute and my 3 half-brothers and sisters. Shortly after he left, the prostitute says, hey, I'm going to go get a pack of cigarettes. Oh, I forgot to tell you, she was a horrific heroin addict. When she leaves, I thought, okay, pack of cigarettes, she'll be back. 1 day turns into 2, 2 turns into 3. It's February. She left me with my half-brothers and sisters. I realize we're running out of food. So I tell the 4-year-old to watch the 3 and the 2-year-old, because I got to go down to the store and steal some food for us to eat. I come back from the store, I quickly realize, oh no, we're out of diapers for the 2-year-old. Well, I can't steal diapers. So I take my little brother, I set him on the toilet, he's crying, I'm crying, and I look at him, I'm like, hey man, until something comes out, this is how it's going down. That's how I learned to be potty trained. 3 days turns into 5, 5 turns into 7. This woman did not come back for us for 3 weeks. I was supposed to be in school. I've been asked often, JT, when did you first experience leadership? Those 3 weeks. When I made the decision not to abandon my brothers and sisters and go to school, but I was going to stay with them. I have never experienced a stress that I did when I had my 3 brothers and sisters. The stress that I had was every day I was so fearful that they were going to turn off the electricity to the house in February and that we would freeze. I was so stressed that they would turn off the water and we wouldn't be able to flush the toilet. We wouldn't have water to drink. We wouldn't be able to take a bath. Every day I was stressed that that was going to happen. 3 weeks later, the prostitute shows up. Now, that's my brother and sisters, that's their mom. So they're excited. They run up and everybody's happy. They're doing love and all that good stuff. I stand back. I muster up all 12 years old of me, wasn't this big. And I get in her face and I go, where the F have you been? This woman punched me so hard, my ears started bleeding. I fell to the ground. She started kicking and beating me. I jumped up and I left the house. I ran away. But I got brought back. And the beating the second time was worse than the first. Fortunately or unfortunately, one of my uncles, my dad's brothers, picks me up the next day, takes me to another girlfriend's house because that prostitute didn't want me there anymore. So he takes me to another one of my dad's girlfriend's house. For the first week, everything was great. It was nice and peaceful. I had something to eat. She even bought me a few clothes. But then the weekend rolled around. Oh, and this woman was a horrible alcoholic. She starts beating me. I'm tired of getting beat. I fight back. She calls the police. I go to juvenile. Now I'm going to pause there. If you all remember, my mother's in Texas and has no clue where I am. My father's in England and only God knows where he is. No one knows I'm in juvenile. I was there for almost 3 months. Finally, one of my aunts came and picked me up, and I stayed with my aunt. But in the middle of the night, I heard my aunt and uncle talking, and they said, we can't afford to feed him. So I pack up my little suitcase, and I leave, and I go sleep on the bus stop. I'm homeless, 13 years old. But I continue to go to school because I know I can get a free meal. But I'm in middle school. And kids are harsh in middle school. One little boy would constantly make fun of me. I cracked, and I beat that little boy up, and he went into the hospital. I went back to juvenile. I was in juvenile 3 different times. The last time I was in juvenile, the corrections officer looks at me and he says, "Come here, son. If you come back here again, you're going to man prison." Now, I'm 47 years old. I don't know about you, but man prison just does not sound right to me. So I made the bold decision that, okay, I'm never going to man prison because that just doesn't sound right. So 15 years old, I ended up being reunited with my mother in Texas. She takes me to enroll in school. I get there, the counselor says, okay, you're a sophomore in high school, you're 15 years old, you should be in these classes. And she says the word geometry. I'm 15 years old, and that was the first time I had ever heard the word geometry. But hell, at 15 years old, I didn't even know they delivered pizza. At 15 years old, I had never had a chicken breast. So they put me in these classes. 6 weeks later, everyone pretty much knows, oh, mother of God, look at those grades. Okay, this kid's not too bright. So my mother has me tested. I'm testing on a 5th and 6th grade level. Needless to say, graduation rolls around. I never graduated high school. I had to go to summer school and take remedial courses to get my high school diploma. Now, I know some of you would call that a GED. Damn it, it says high school diploma. I got a high school diploma. I never graduated from college, and my first job out of high school was cleaning toilets at a restaurant. I would come in each morning, and I would have to clean the toilets from the night before. And I remember standing there looking at the toilets, and I said to myself, God, these things are just filthy nasty. But you know what? If this is my job, I'm going to have the cleanest toilets in the state of Texas. And everything I did going forward, I made sure that I was going to be the very best at it. Now, I'm in a group of CFOs. You'll appreciate this. My first career role, I got into payday loans. Man, you want to learn interest rates, and that was an interesting career, but it was my springboard into my career. From there, I got into mortgages, how to originate mortgages, all things mortgages, mortgage-backed securities, CDOs, yeah, I said that. And I remember during the credit crisis, my mother called me and she goes, hey, do you have anything to do with that? A little bit. And along the way, I was working for a company, 13 of us. I was in a storage closet. And it was a software company. I became the president of a software company. We grew this company from a storage closet to offices in Houston, Dallas, Austin, and Monterrey, Mexico, from 13 people in a storage closet. A software company. I don't write code. I'm now the CEO of a publishing company. And God knows I can't tell you an adverb from a pronoun. And I damn sure can't spell. In fact, I'm still waiting to meet the man or woman who invented spell check, because thank God you have been influential in my career. The other piece of this, because I am with CFOs, along the way, I also taught myself how to compile, read, and understand income statements, balance sheets, CapEx, OpEx, EBITDA. I even managed to teach myself the markets and how to turn $100 into 8 figures. Still waiting for somebody to show up and ask me for that money back. Unfortunately, my father never got to see any of that. He never knew what I actually accomplished in life. About 1.5 years ago, I got an email that my father had passed away. I went to my father's funeral. It's me in the middle there. Those are real 1970s pimps. You gotta love the guy with the pink shoes and the pink cuffs. You gotta love that. Look at my man with the all red over there. My only regret from my father's funeral was that I didn't get a picture with all the pimps. There was lime green, yellow, pink. When I first found out my father passed away, I struggled, because I swore I'd never go back to Dayton, Ohio. I hadn't talked to my father in over 30 years. And I struggled. Do I go back? Do I go to his funeral? And I was very happy that I did, because for all the money that that man made as a pimp and drug dealer, he died broke. See, you're never going to meet a retired pimp off the coast of Florida who's now managing a marina. That was for you, Ken. You're never going to meet that pimp. See, my father died broke, not a penny. So much so that when I went back, I paid for his funeral. The reason why I paid for his funeral is because I remember as a 5-year-old child waiting for my father to pick me up, standing in the window for hours, 2, 3, 4 hours, loyal. He'll be here, and he never showed up. So when I went back to his funeral, I stood over his casket and I looked and I said, you know what? Be it heaven, be it hell, wherever you are, I didn't want you to wait on me like I waited on you. So one thing that I would have liked my father to have seen, if you all recall, I said that my father would always talk about the CEO of Budweiser, the CEO of Budweiser. Take a look at this cover here. You've got 4-star General Petraeus, you've got Heisman Trophy winner Bo Jackson, you got the billionaire hedge funder Leon Cooperman, some guy named JT McCormick over there in the corner. But what really jumped off to me when I saw this cover is the person above me is the CEO of Budweiser. I'm man enough to admit I shed tears, I smiled, and I said, well played, Dad, well played. Of all the accomplishments I've had in life, of everything that I'll go off to accomplish in life, my greatest accomplishment is and always will be my family. See, I didn't repeat the cycle of my father. I've got 4 now. My wife gave birth to our 4th last week. So I've got 4 children. Thank you. 4 children, all by the same woman. I take care of them. That's my greatest accomplishment. I'm going to close out with 2 things here. I thought I was. I'm often asked, JT, how did you do it? How did you not become a victim? How did you get past that? How did you go through all of those things and not become a victim? Here's what I realized. No matter how many times I ask why, it doesn't change anything. Why was my father a pimp? Why don't I know where my last name comes from? Why did that woman sexually molest me? Why? Nothing changes. What I realized was I was the only person who had the power to not be a victim. I made the decision that I can't change the past. Oh, but damn it, I can change the next hour, week, month, and year. I can go off to be successful and have a phenomenal life. And that's the decision I made. Leave you with this last piece. We live in a society where you often hear, and it's celebrated, fail fast, fail fast. The hell with fail fast. I've spent my whole life trying to learn faster. See, I believe you only fail if you stop trying. And I will never stop trying to be the best person, human, husband, father, and leader that I can be. My ask of each one of you when you leave here today is that you have the power to share your stories. Share your experience, your knowledge, your wisdom. Share your mistakes. More importantly, share your story so we can all learn faster. Thank you all. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it, Jeremy. Thank you.
Wow.